Hello everyone, this is Marcel. Welcome to my channel. So for today's topic, I want to discuss emotional damage. I'm going to briefly discuss the way the brain functions, how it interprets emotional trauma, how the genders differ in relation to trauma, how society perceives the relevance of emotional trauma, and finally wrap it up with my perception of how emotional bonding and trauma affects relationships. I'm sure there might be some out there that will disagree with my views, and that's fine. They're welcome to. It's the beauty of psychology is that a big portion of it is relative. Considering it's a field that's advancing almost constantly, it would make sense to take anything you hear in regards to psychology with a grain of salt. Having said that, this video is still likely to summarize a lot of different concepts that most people may not recognize when it comes to the psychology of trauma and emotional harm. How various people recuperate from said harm. First of all, recognize that the brain, and therefore the emotions and consciousness of a person, is an organ. By that I mean it functions in much the same way as the heart, liver, lungs. It operates by using energy. It's influenced by hormones and chemicals. It provides a function for the body in the case of humans and higher organisms beyond that of simple respiration and bodily functions, but it still operates like an organ. It has a limited range of stress tolerances when it comes to how long it can go without energy or nutrients, how long it can go under a heightened stress or excessive work before it starts to break down. In the case of humans specifically, the mind is required to go through an abnormal number of stressors that wouldn't have been existent in prehistory, or at least not to the same degree. For example, evolution couldn't have planned forward for finding your spouse cheating on you, or losing the title to your house to the bank. Fight or flight responses are typically the first line of defense for survival, and emotionally speaking, those kind of stimuli don't warrant that kind of response, at least in most cases. So people will find themselves having to find ways to tolerate all of that emotional stress and still existing and still functioning, despite it being evolutionarily speaking unusual for what people as just an organism would be adapted for. In a sense, the body may respond in much the same way to losing that deed to the house as if it were being attacked by a predator or losing its offspring, at least on a hormonal or emotional level. Considering for some people those situations are fairly common, the house one that is, and societally speaking are expected to be tolerated better than they often are, it feels fairly accurate to say that those kind of things cause unusual levels of stress. So for a moment, picture the mind in the same way you'd picture like a bicep on your arm flexing. It can be worked out regularly and it will become stronger. If it's allowed to rest, then it can become stronger faster. If it's damaged, it needs time to heal. If it's allowed to heal properly, then it has very little scarring. The strength of anyone's bicep can be based upon things like genetics, gender, how much they've worked it out, how well they've taken care of it, their nutrients, their supplements, what they eat, what their diet is. There's a multitude of factors that just go into that simple muscle. And the brain is far more complex and far more sensitive in the way that it's affected. The reason that I say all of this, and granted I realize that a lot of it's obvious, is that there's a number of people out there that have a disconnect between the concept of consciousness and personality and emotions and then the organ that exists behind them. I made a realization earlier that I hadn't recognized. This is probably where it's going to start getting more interesting. Women are not emotionally stronger than men. There seems to be this perception, and I'm even guilty of it too in some of my older videos, that women are strong when it comes to emotion and men are strong when it comes to physical actions, and it's not true. Women have very little emotional tolerances when compared to men. Think of the number of times that men have to get devastated by the loss of a job or the loss of a girlfriend or losing their kids and paying child support for 10 years. All the emotional turmoil that men go through and they just keep pounding through it. I don't see women going through that and making it out the other side. Granted, of course, that's relative to the individual. I would compare men and women emotionally in the same way that I would compare like a gymnast with a bodybuilder. Trying to say that women are stronger emotionally is trying to say that that gymnast is stronger than the bodybuilder. Well, they're not, but they do have a set of skills that sets them apart from the bodybuilder. That bodybuilder could likely crush them with a single squeeze, but the thing is that they would have to catch them first. The gymnast, for example, might be very agile, could dance around them and just avoid them completely. And keep in mind, we're talking an analogy here, not literally. And that would be more than enough to win the situation to their favor, for giving the competitive analogy. Women have emotional skills and abilities. They have the capability of actually depositing their emotions on other people. It comes almost naturally to manipulate most men into doing what they want. Men are not typically able to do that. They internalize their emotions much more often. They don't offload them, which means that they also have to cope with them internally, which over time, if allowed to heal, allowed to interpret those experiences properly and get back up to normal afterwards, they can actually become quite strong. It's the same concept of growing up, being through a lot of shit. They're not going to be weak. Of course, if men were able to just dump off all their negative emotions on other people with the snap of a finger, then they probably would not be as strong as they are now. So I've recognized through society that any kind of emotional difficulties that a woman goes through is taken very seriously. If her husband or boyfriend is causing her problems emotionally, it's dealt with hastily. Anything involving work or school, if all they have to do is say something, and they get a multitude of officials or white knights to run and help them. But if a man has any kind of emotional trauma, he's automatically perceived as weak. He's expected to endure. Now, granted, this is not a touchy-feely video. Men should be stronger. But not having any problems taken seriously, disregarded, or even being criticized for them puts men in situations where they can't find the resources they need to actually survive a lot of the turmoil that they're going through. Everyone has a snapping point. This is why the male suicide rate is so high. So let's move this discussion forward a little bit. Now, emotional damage when it comes to relationships. So when a person learns something, like practice for a test or prepares for a job interview, maybe has a bad experience, those things are remembered. They leave an imprint on the mind. For those that agree that women imprint more when it comes to who they're dating, at least in an emotional sense, we may also agree that they carry on a lot of those memories with them in further relationships. In a sense, men bond more physically, women bond more emotionally. Does anyone disagree with that? I'd be curious to know your thoughts. I don't know who said it first, but I like the concept that every time a woman bonds with a new partner, her ability to pair bond is divided by half. That feels really accurate to me. So after the third or fourth boyfriend / husband, they're going to be able maybe a quarter or an eighth or 16th of the available bonding is still there. And it gets to a point where they've been through enough boyfriends or husbands that they become emotionally numb. It doesn't matter how the relationship goes because it's just going to end anyway. They don't take it seriously. Now, of course, I'm not disagreeing with something that I believe Turd-Flinging Monkey says a lot, which is that women love differently than men do. I'm just saying that a woman's best chance at having a solid, dedicated relationship that's going to last and have the emotion behind it is going to be towards the earlier part of her life before she rides the carousel. If she does at all. Consider how many women have gone seeking the excitement and the love and the passion that they experienced on their first relationship, hopping between guys, trying to find that original feeling again, trying to chase the dragon, but never quite coming up. Every guy has his shortcomings that never really replaces that experience. Well, it's because it was a novel experience and that was probably the strongest bond that she'll ever have. Every further bond is just the next boyfriend. Then once kids come into the picture, it throws a huge wrench in that engine. They become the priority and the main focus, and the guy gets completely dumped to the side. Though that's another discussion entirely. The thing is that love and romance modern times is supposed to be an emotional experience. And with every subsequent boyfriend, women become more emotionally affected by their experiences previously. In the case of men, they recover much more effectively. And for a blue pill guy, he has to. Because if he doesn't, he's not going to be able to succeed even at the slightest with the next girlfriend. Not that they typically ever do. So why is it that guys so frequently go through the abuse over and over again? It almost feels like trying to save a relationship is like trying to paint the walls in a house that's crumbling. The roof is falling in and they're trying to hang a chandelier. A logical mind would probably just move out. That's just not the way men work. Of course, when it's considered the amount of damage that's done to the guy by her cheating, by her lies, by her leaving him. I mean, could you imagine if it would be taken seriously if a guy were to say, no, she emotionally harmed me because she cheated on me with 7 other guys and lied to me for 14 years? He'd get laughed out of a courtroom. Nobody would care. And that's disgusting. Called weak on one hand and then expected to be kind of an Olympian on the other. Of course, you know, it's whatever fits the woman's narrative, right? As a summary, when it comes to stress, I would say that probably the biggest 2 things that affect men, and some cases women, everywhere, is relationships and money. Probably money being the primary one. Considering heart disease is basically the #1 killer of men, according to statistics about 2 years ago, it would make sense that removal of stress would lengthen a guy's life quite substantially. Can we all agree that women cost a substantial amount of money? Just dating, supporting a family, taking care of them, paying for the fancy stuff that has to attract them in the first place. I wonder how many years of my life were spent earning the money that I've wasted on women. That's not even including the time in the relationship itself, just the time working to buy the stuff. Then the emotional harm that's caused by the relationship itself, the stress when they leave, the effects that come from it. I mean, if I had a nice car outside that I practically had to watch 24/7 to make sure nobody stole it, I had to clean it several times a day so it wouldn't get dirty. Had to pay a fortune for the upkeep, constantly getting new parts on it so it would look nice. Worried somebody else gonna be driving it when I'm gone. You know what I'm talking about. There comes a point when owning that car is no longer worth it because the amount of stress that it causes doesn't justify the experience of owning it. Anyway, that's about all I have to say on this topic. I hope that was interesting. Kind of went on a science rant there. But if you stuck it out this far, you're awesome. Let me know what you thought down below. If you want to hear more content like this, like, share, subscribe. Till next time, this has been Marcel.